Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 3, Drunk in Wild Songs. Chapter 211, Heavy Frost. A boundless expanse of thick clouds swarmed forth and swallowed up the sunlight. Falcons from Libya soared across the vast horizon. Men was the first to swoop down. Under the cries of the falcon, it spread its wings, dispersing the thin fog as it looked down upon the stretch of pure white snow. The Saker falcons came from the south like a volley of sharp arrows shooting straight towards the falcons. Letting out a long, loud cry, Meng spun and brushed past the military banner beneath. The sound of war drums instantly reverberated through the sinkhole. Cavalrymen surged towards them with the momentum of a tidal wave incoming from the south. The armored cavalry remained still. Once the scimitars of the Bianchi cavalrymen could be clearly seen, Yin Chang drew his old blade with a loud clang and roared at the sky, "Unveil the trenches!" The imperial army, who had been lying prostrate in the snowfield, promptly released their grip on the ropes at both ends, exposing the newly dug trenches. Meanwhile, the Bianchi cavalry, renowned for their speed, was charging long distance towards them when they crossed the trenches. Unable to stop in time, the horses fell into the trenches, and cracking sounds instantly rang out as their front knees broke on impact. The vanguards of the Bianchi cavalry tumbled into the trenches, throwing the array at the head into disorder. The imperial army instantly drew their blades and pounced like wolves to engage this batch of vanguards in the trenches. Without losing speed, the Bianchi cavalry at the back spurred their horses into leaping over the trenches to continue with their charge forward. Even as Yin Chang hacked down the Bianchi cavalry, he still had to dodge the hooves leaping over his head, or he might just get his head kicked into a bloody pulp in a moment of inattention. He bent over and shouted over to the other end, "Lao Hu, what's wrong with you? You dug this way too narrow." Tantai, whose palms were slick with sweat. He heard Yin Chang's shouts as he fixed his eyes on the Bianchi cavalry galloping over, but he did not dare to divert his attention to answer. Gripping his own twin blades, he silently recited Tantai Long's name to himself. A Bianchi cavalryman's scimitar was already swinging towards him when the ponies were right about to reach him. Tantai, who rolled forward, and Xiao Qi, who was behind him, stuck out Longly blade in a flash, making use of the cavalryman's momentum to stab through him. Blood splattered. Leading the garrison troops, Tantai, who crouched and slashed his blade across to cut off the ponies' legs. The ponies screamed and threw back their heads as they toppled over to the ground, like wild geese that had lost their wings. The cavalryman fell off the ponies and rolled. Tantai, who wiped the blood from his face, lifted both blades, and roared, "Revenge avenged!" After getting thwarted again and again, the Bianchi cavalry decreased the momentum of their charge, no longer willing to advance rashly. But the distance between them had already shrunk. They wanted to retreat, but Xiao Qi was now advancing. Xiao Qi tapped gently on the abdomen of his horse with the back of his blade, and Lang Tao Shuijin charged forth. The sound of the Libya armored cavalry's hoofs was as resounding as muffled thunder as they pushed forth urgently with the snowstorm moving in tandem. They rammed into the Bianchi cavalry, breaking the latter's battle array into tatters. The war chariot formation left the Bianchi cavalry with no time to catch their breaths. As long as they were slammed over to the ground by the heavy armors, the iron horseshoes of the Libya armored cavalry would trample over flesh and blood as they steamrolled over the Bianchi cavalrymen's bodies. A Saker falcon swept past overhead, with the wind trailing in its path as it attempted to flee east. Meng swooped through the snow and grabbed hold of the Saker falcon with its talons. As it passed by Libya's wolf banner, it ripped off one of the Saker falcon's wings before flinging the Saker falcon away. The Bianchi cavalry retreated like the receding tide, and one of its young generals galloped on horseback and yelled a series of swift commands. He withdrew the regular cavalry, then chided the scorpions in the Bianchi tongue for them to advance. The scimitars were instantly drawn back as the cavalrymen retreated with their eyes on the Libya armored cavalry. Xiao Qi slowly returned to the battle formation, and the protruding columns on all sides followed suit and merged back swiftly. The scorpions took the place of the vanguards. The iron hammers they swung no longer faced up to one armored cavalry, but a group of armored cavalries. Xiao Qiye led the charge. As he sped forth, he suddenly kept away Longli blade. Following his action, the armored cavalry behind him unleashed those new blades of terrifying length. Xiao Qiye bent over slightly as they stabbed hard into the ranks of the scorpions like a flash of cold glint in the night. Xiao Qiye flipped the longer hilt with both hands and took away a scorpion's head as his horse passed by. To reduce its weight, the sharp steel of the long blade was thinned down, and it took just the blink of an eye for throats to be slit. A spray of blood instantly spattered towards his heavy armor along its iron arm before spilling onto the ground. The iron hammers could not keep up with the speed of the long blades, and they were not long enough to swing and hit the armored cavalrymen themselves either. All they could do was watch helplessly as the Libe armored cavalry killed their way into their formation and cut down their own ranks into two halves. Lang Tao Shuijin broke through the Bianchi cavalry's encirclement and snorted as it turned around on its hooves. Xiao Qiye held his long blade at a slanting angle and shook off the viscous blood on its blade. Scorpions on both sides gasped for air as they watched all of their center unit tumble off their horses. Everywhere Xiao Qiye passed, streams of flowing blood formed. His long blade practically sliced off the heads of everyone who stood in his way. A scorpion pulled at his reins as he murmured in the Bianchi tongue, "Chidaki." The Libe armored cavalry spurred on their horses once more, and the scorpions, no longer willing to continue fighting, turned their horses around at the sound of that muffled thunder. When the young general of the Bianchi cavalry at the back saw the scorpions retreating, he hurriedly brandished his blade to berate them, but to no avail. Fear had already been sown in the hearts of the scorpions. Following the loss of their leader, they had been reduced to mere sacrifices on this battlefield. Lang Tao Shuijin galloped out of the pack, while the Libe armored cavalry followed close behind on its trail. The Bianchi cavalry on the south side of the sinkhole were too powerless to resist, as their scimitars were unable to pierce the heavy armors. Those who lost their ponies scrambled over themselves to run like mad in the snow, their urgent breaths of white air resembling a wave of flood water breaching its dam. Surfaces of snow quaked as the Libe armored cavalry made its passage through. A Bianchi cavalryman who was falling behind the rest fell to the ground, and his scimitar went flying from his hand. Before he could even reach out a hand to draw out his piked dagger, he was swallowed up whole under the hooves of the armored cavalry. Xiao Qiye charged out from the fringe of the battle formation and chased after the Bianchi cavalry like Xiao Fangxiu had done so 30 years ago, showing no mercy under the iron hooves of his horse. The Libe armored cavalry ran on a rampage as they assaulted and massacred their way forward. Heavy armors gravely traversed the battlefield, turning into heavy blades in the midst of emerging from their sheaths in Tantaihu's eyes. As a scorpion galloped on his horse, he shouted sharply, "Chidaki! Vicious wolf!" 7 years ago, Xiao Jiming led the troops down south, earning himself the name Glacier Armored Cavalry, and tonight, Xiao Qiye chased after the Bianchi cavalry for 20 li, the echoes reverberating through the lands he stepped on. Damn! The jut in Yin Chang's throat bobbed as he wiped the blood off his face and recited silently to himself. The passage of heavy frost through the lands leaves not a blade of grass in its wake. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Shenzequan was boiling tea in his tent. The prefectural lord, inept as he was in the art of brewing tea, simply stuffed the tea leaves into the teapot, filled it with water, and set it on the fire to boil. His folding fan was resting on his knee, and there was a stack of piled-up documents on the desk at his side, yet his eyes were fixed on that tea as he watched it gradually start to boil and bubble over. Haragu squatted at the entrance of the tent and peeked through the gap. "It's not drinkable if you boil it like this, or is it?" he asked Fei Sheng. Fei Sheng did not have a favorable impression of this scorpion, so he looked ahead with his arms folded and listened to the urgent beats of the war drums. "It's not like you are going to be drinking it, so what are you worrying about?" Shenzequan stared blankly for a long time, and by the time he returned to his senses, the tea had almost evaporated. He lifted the teapot off, added more water, and continued to boil it. The sound of boiling water could cover up some of the drumming from the war drums, which was putting him in a dazed trance. He had not done any work today either. Seeing as it was late, Fei Sheng lifted the flap to enter. He said softly to Shen Zequin, "Master, how about taking a quick nap? As soon as there's news from the battlefront, I'll call you." Shen Zequin lowered his eyes and did not answer him. Fei Sheng understood that the prefectural lord was reluctant to do so, so he dared not persuade him further and retreated to the entrance of the tent to wait in attendance. The tea in the military tent boiled for the entire night. When it was almost dawn, Shen Zequin heard the war drum stop. Shen Zequin rose and pushed aside the flap. Fei Sheng hurriedly draped a cloak over him and accompanied Shen Zequin out of the tent. They made their way outside, where Shen Zequin waited again for a moment in the snowy fog bathed in the first glimmer of dawn. It was extremely frigid in the morning, so frigid that the tip of one's nose would turn red from the freezing cold if one stood for too long out in the open. The north wind pounced on their faces like sharp knives. After a little less than an hour, Shen Zequin suddenly heard the rising sound of hooves, followed by rows after rows of emerging silhouettes overlapping one another. Meng was the first to return to camp. Fei Sheng heaved a sigh of relief as if he had been relieved of a heavy load. He immediately congratulated Shen Zequin, "Master, it's a success." Meng circled in the air, wanting to land on Shen Zequin's arm. Shen Zequin was not wearing his arm guard today. Just as he lifted his arm, a whistle sounded from the other end. Xiao Qiye broke through the boundless expanse of heavy fog and spurred his horse on without stopping. The moment he rushed into the campgrounds, he swept up Shen Zequin. Lang Tao Shuijin slowed and turned its hooves around to gallop away into the fog again with both men on its back. Meng, which had pounced on empty air, landed on the military banner and wiped its talons clean as it watched them run further away into the distance with a sidelong glance. Yin Chang, with arms cradling his war trophy, wanted to say something but Fei Sheng held him back and did not give him the chance to open his mouth. The rest of them wore a wide array of expressions. Tantai who spat on his palms and rubbed them together to warm them up a little. "Let's enter the tent first. Military affairs can be reported a little later. There's no hurry to do so right now." With that, he repeated it once more, only to make what he had been trying to cover up all the more conspicuous. "No hurry to do so now." "What cha mean?" "No hurry." Yin Chang craned his neck to look around him and said in bafflement, "We have to head back to the city at the hour of Mao. His lordship's very much in a hurry." End chapter. Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 3, Drunk in Wild Songs. Chapter 212, Dredge Up the Past. Lang Tao Shuijin galloped away from the campgrounds, but did not go far. It came to a stop on a snowy slope at the northern end of the Hashi sinkhole. The humid fog and snow made Shen Zequin appear to be situated amidst the vast expanse of misty, rolling waves on the lake's surface. All his eyes could see where they roamed was white. Xiao Qiye rolled off his horse and removed his helmet. There was sweat along his temples as he panted slightly, yet his eyes were full of spirits. "Can you see Duan province?" As Shen Zequin held onto Lang Tao Shuijin's reins, he handed the blue handkerchief in his sleeve over to Xiao Qiye. He could only catch a glimpse of the abandoned relay station's watchtower in the far distance amidst the visible clouds of his breath, but he understood Xiao Qiye's jubilation. "Looking at Duan province now is just like looking into what's already in my bag." Xiao Qiye lifted his chin slightly, and beads of sweat trickled down. He smiled. Shen Zequin gazed at him, realizing that he still retained the unyielding and untamable attitude he possessed during their time in Chu capital. This was the spirit that Shen Zequin desired to have in his possession. Shen Zequin leaned over, breathing onto Xiao Qiye's cheeks. The tip of his nose pressed right up against Xiao Qiye and edged up along the latter's temple as he licked the latter's sweat like he desired. Those beads of astringent, Salty sweat dissolved in Shen Zequin's mouth. As the jut in his throat bobbed slightly, "This will be Xiao Xian's riding track from now on." Xiao Qi raised a hand over Shen Zequin's nape, covering it, and the iron fingers of the armor he had yet to remove were icy and hard as they lay over the soft, fair neck, leaving behind a touch that resembled the cold steel of a blade. "I don't want a riding track." The straight bridge of Xiao Qi's nose nuzzled along the spot on Shen Zequin that had been bobbing earlier. He watched fixedly as Shen Zequin narrowed his expressive eyes. His words had an edge of danger to it as he said, "I want Chen Lanzhou." Shen Zequin breathed out a puff of hot air at Xiao Qiye. Xiao Qiye thought Shen Zequin wanted to kiss him. He did not expect Lanzhou to grab the chance to pull back the blue handkerchief in his hand. Shen Zequin then straightened up and wrapped the overcoat tightly around himself. The prefectural lord, who was sensitive to the cold, revealed only his eyes and the reddened tips of his ears as he said in a muffled voice, "Shen Lanzhou is freezing to death." Xiao Qiye, with his arms empty, had still yet to realize what just happened. Shen Zequin watched Xiao Qiye's expression undergo several changes. Xiao Qiye looked as though he was going to make a grab for him, so Shen Zequin immediately shook the reins to urge Lang Tao Shuijin into returning back to camp. Xiao Qiye cradled his helmet in his arms. There was still a lingering warmth from where he had been licked on his temple. He touched it, gradually getting riled up as though he were a maiden of a decent family who had been disrespected by a frivolous philanderer. "Shen Lanzhou," Xiao Qiye watched as Shen Zequin fled. With a stride of his long legs, he slid down the snowy slope and yelled, "You heartless cad!" Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Achi, who had been confident of success, had been defeated at the Hashi sinkhole, and the Biancha people, who had been winning battles in the north for half a year, never expected Achi to lose to Xiao Qiye. The remaining soldiers in Duan province were no match for Wu Ziu's surprise attack. Consequently, the 6 prefectures of Zongbo all fell under Shen Zequin's command. Chu capital received news of it only 7 days later. At the same time that the military report of Qi Ziyuan's mobilization of troops into battle with the Qingsha tribe also made its way into the palace. The Empress Dowager sat in Mingli Hall behind the hanging curtain and flung the memorial onto the seat across the luminous pearls. The eastern pearls swayed beside her ears as she held back her rage and barked at the ministers in the hall. Did the Ministry of War reject Qidong's request to deploy its troops or not? "Chen Zhen, you handle military affairs, and you can't even make yourself clear." The Minister of War, Chen Zhen, immediately kneeled on the ground, knowing that the Empress Dowager was venting her anger. Qi Ziyuan now had a strong and well-trained military, and Chu capital was unwilling to act rashly and offend them, so they could only take it out on the easy games like him. He listened expressionlessly until she was done speaking before saying, "In the first month of the year, Commander-in-Chief Qi presented a memorial to the imperial court, hoping to deploy troops to fight the Qingsha tribe. We rejected her request on the grounds that we were lacking in military provisions. The Grand Secretariat kept a copy of the correspondences for archival records. The Senior Grand Secretary and the various other ministers are all aware of it." The Empress Dowager understood that this was in no way authorized by the Ministry of War, but she was still fuming. After a moment's pause, she continued, "So why did she go ahead with it this time? 7 days ago, the Bianjun Commandery's night patrol encountered a surprise attack by the Qingsha tribe." Chen Zhen lifted his head slightly at this point. Commander-in-Chief Qi was thus forced to mobilize the troops. Amuir is at war with Libei in the north. Why would the Qingsha tribe provoke Qidong for no rhyme or reason? Han Cheng had been at the receiving end of Qi Ziyuan's frostiness when he escorted Hua Xianji to her new home. Sitting in the hall now, he suddenly bared a smile and said, "Then again, it's really such a coincidence that Commander-in-Chief Qi happened to be in the Bianjun Commandery just when the Qingsha tribe launched their surprise attack. This battle was such a swift and abrupt one that the report of victory and request were both presented together. Even if she was at fault, she had already succeeded." Kong Qiu, who had fallen ill after the New Year, sat in the hall with his complexion all ashen as he covered his mouth and coughed. We cannot listen to only one side of the story. If the Qiang tribe had genuinely crossed the line, then Commander-in-Chief Qi's mobilization of troops was an emergency action. For the past years, the situation at the frontiers has been unstable. When Lu Guangbai was still stationed at the Bianjun Commandery, the Qiang tribe often invaded as well. The details of the matter still need to be presented by Commander-in-Chief Qi. What is of utmost urgency now is how long this war will continue. We are right about to enter the plowing season in spring, and the 13 cities of Juexi are still waiting for the arrangements to be made. The supply of military provisions is of major concern. Pan Xiangji timidly folded his arms up his sleeves. Xue Xiaozuo wanted to investigate their Pan clan of Dan City, and this matter had been stuck at an impasse for a long time. Given that the fields were still in dispute, he did not dare to interject in now for fear that the Grand Secretariat would apportion the shortfall of military provision to them. The Empress Dowager did not consent to send their troops to war because Qidong's deployment of troops at this moment was akin to supporting Libe, and also because Xue Xiaozuo had been too impatient in chasing the accounts. The 8 great clans were presently in a situation where one slight move could lead to major consequences for all of them. Fields were their roots, and the young masters of the 8 cities all depended on these fields to survive. If an investigation were to be launched, then the noble clans would suffer debilitating effects just by having to return the fields to the common folks and make up for the arrears in taxes. Not to mention that there was also the risk of dismissal and prosecution as well as imprisonment. Qi Ziyun's battle with the Qiang tribe meant that the expenses for the Qidong's 5 commanderies' military salaries and provisions would have to go through the accounts of the Ministry of Revenue. Once the state treasury ran out of money, all the past events during the reign of Yanji were going to get dredged up again. The Empress Dowager was acting in place of the Crown Prince, and there was still the heir apparent beside her eyeing the throne, so she dared not act rashly without careful consideration. Whether Amuir was a rapacious aggressor or not, the noble clans did not know, but they knew it was inadvisable to keep delaying given the current situation. Zongbo had already grown to be a thorn in their sides, and getting themselves stuck in a stalemate with the heir apparent and the Grand Secretariat would not do the noble clans any good. Since it was the Qiang tribe that invaded, Qi Ziyun can just repel them. There is no need to mobilize troops again to penetrate deeper into the enemy's territory. The Empress Dowager's fury had subsided. She deliberated it over and said, I know that it's bitterly cold and impoverished at the frontiers. No doubt the battle with the Biancha people must be fought, but not now. Just as the Grand Secretary has said, the spring plow season is right around the corner. We should place the commoners as our priority. Not all of Juexi's territories last year had bumper harvests either, and the granaries in Chu capital have still yet to be filled to the brim, so where would the imperial court have the spare grains to give Qidong to fight wars? This matter has to be conveyed properly to Qi Ziyun. As someone who assists in the government affairs of the 5 commanderies, she should have long known about this. Silence descended upon Mingli Hall for a moment. The hanging screens at the entrance were all securely tucked in to keep the wind out. Because of Qi Ziyun's mobilization of troops, the atmosphere in the hall was grave and heavy. In truth, Kong Qiu and Sen Yu approved of Qi Ziyun's wish to wage a battle against the Qiang tribe. But they were presently battling it out with the noble clans. Pan Lin was the one who had the Ministry of Revenue in his grasp, but he presently had his hands too full with Xue Xiaozuo incriminating him to jointly discuss the matter of Qidong's military salaries and provisions. Moreover, it was precisely because the Pan clan was the first to bear the brunt that Pan Xiangji did not dare to let his son get too involved with the Grand Secretariat at this juncture. Pan Xiangji was used to playing the fence-sitter. It was all thanks to this ability to sway where the wind blows that he could survive until now. He did not want to offend Xue Xiaozuo, and he did not want to offend the Empress Dowager either. As long as there was no victor in the tussle for power in Chu capital, he was unwilling to let the Pan clan follow another's lead easily. In the past, he threw in his lot with Hua Saiqian and Wei Huigu, but these two men both used him as a scapegoat. Now wary and guarded, he trusted none of these three parties. Sen Yu sighed lightly. He rarely spoke up in Mingli Hall now. Yu Xiaozhe left the capital with the letter he wrote to Shen Zequan, but Shen Zequan never replied, and he understood what Shen Zequan meant by that. Everyone had drinks in his house a year ago, and he still remembered the distinguished figures Shen Zequan and Xiao Qiye had cut then. He found it a pity the way things had turned out. Sen Yu shifted his gaze to Li Jianting, who was sitting upright at the side staring at the tea before her, as if she had not heard the discussion in the hall. After the court session was dismissed, Sen Yu and Kong Qiu walked along the long path that had been cleared of snow. The palace eaves on both sides hung low, turning the paths oppressively dim. The eunuch in front was holding a lantern. As Sen Yu walked, his sleeves flapped in the wind. The wind blew his short, newly grown beard all over, and he lifted a hand to stroke it. "Why didn't you say a word today with something this big happening?" Kong Qiu asked. Sen Yu lifted his eyes. "Her Majesty's mind is already made up. The result will be the same, whether or not I speak up." It was already dark by the time both men walked out of the palace gate. Sen Yu did not get into the horse carriage. Instead, he carried the lantern himself and stepped on the snow as he walked on the level path with Kong Qiu. "Sunyi, you seem to have a lot on your mind today." Kong Qiu scrutinized him. "What are you thinking about?" "Thinking about how on this same day last year," Sen Yu answered, "when Vice Commander Shen and the Marquis of Dingdu were both still in Chu capital. If Emperor Tianchen had not been assassinated, perhaps Shen Zequan and Xiao Qiye would still be in Chu capital today." Sen Yu had always been one to cherish talents. He once thought of having Shen Zequan join the imperial court as an official, but alas, things did not go the way he wished. The weight of Shen Zequan's crime was too heavy. Kong Qiu let out a long sigh and thought of Hai Lianji again. If Emperor Tianchen possessed even a fraction of a crown prince's disposition, would you and I be reduced to such a state? I've been feeling more and more out of my depth lately. There are simply too many situations that are beyond my ability to salvage. They do not consent to the current war Commander-in-Chief Qi is waging with the Qingsha tribe for fear that the military provisions would drag the 8 cities' fields into it. But I can tell that the war in Libei is at a tense and critical juncture. Even the Prince of Libei, Xiao Fangxiu, met his end in battle. The strength and the capabilities of the Bianxia can no longer be underestimated." Sen Yu could see it all clearly, but it was pointless. He could not solve the conflict in Chu capital just with his eloquence alone. It was simply too tall of an order to get the noble clans to relinquish their existing interests. Both of them had not gone far when they saw a man standing under a bamboo umbrella ahead of them, waiting. Sen Yu and Kong Qiu traded looks and looked at Xue Xiaozuo. Xue Xiaozuo's official robe was brand new, and he was not wearing a lined jacket. He stood in that spot all by his lonesome self, like a floating leaf among the torrential currents even as the wind sent his sleeves fluttering. He kept away his umbrella and bowed in greetings to Sen Yu and Kong Qiu. "Why are you standing here? Is something the matter?" Kong Qiu asked. Xue Xiaozuo straightened up as floating snow sporadically danced past. "This humble official has been waiting here for both gentlemen to discuss the issue of the fields in Dan City and taxes in detail." Sen Yu frowned slightly and said, "Affairs of the imperial court should be settled on the imperial court itself. There is no reason to discuss them in private. This case, in particular, should avoid having aspersions cast on it. If others were to see this, rumors and slanders would inevitably start making their rounds. You should go back first. We'll discuss it in the Grand Secretariat's office tomorrow morning after the morning court session. If not for the urgency of the matter, this humble official would naturally not dare to bother both of you." Xue Xiaozuo's expression remained unchanged. At the beginning of the month, Her Majesty drew up a decree to have a key official from the Ministry of Revenue tag along to investigate the case, and Pan Lin appointed Liang Qiushan, who is in charge of salt taxes in He province and Juexi. Kong Qiu and Sen Yu both knew who Liang Qiushan was. Xiao Qiye had vouched for him and recommended him for an official position during the collapse of the public ditches. He was a Ministry of Revenue official who had been personally appointed by Emperor Tianqian to investigate Wei Huigu in the case of the military provisions. He was very talented in the administration of financial affairs and taxes. Last year, he sorted out the old accounts of the 13 cities with Zhang Qingshan in Juexi, and for a period of time, he even managed the transportation of grains by water from He province to the capital. Yan Hiru told Shen Zequan that it was tough to do business via the waterways. The Yan clan's goods heading for Juexi were all subjected to rigorous checks, and Liang Qiushan was the reason for this. This man was smooth and diplomatic in his work, but he was not a slippery character. In his position, the amount of tax money passing through his hand every day numbered tens of thousands of silver. Yan Hiru wanted to pull strings and make backdoor deals with him, but his attempts were all rebuffed. Liang Qiushan has already returned to the capital and will enter the palace tomorrow morning to seek an audience. Shuezius who held his umbrella in his arms. But he had a narrow escape this trip and must meet both gentlemen tonight. End chapter. Qiang Jin Jiu. Book 3, Drunk in Wild Songs. Chapter 213, Turn of Events. Liang Qiushan was not wearing his official robe. Instead, he had on a sheepskin-lined jacket over his upper garment with overlapping collars and a pair of green cloth shoes. He was the total antithesis of His Excellency Chongshen as town rumors went, having a short beard, squarish face, and a tanned complexion from being on the move outside all day. His hands also did not seem to be the kind that held brushes but hose. Sen Yu almost took him for an errand runner when he stood under the relay station's lantern to meet Kong Qiu and Sen Yu. "Why does Chongshen look like this?" Sen Yu asked in astonishment. Liang Qiushan led them upstairs and waited for them to take their seats before he answered. "It's a long story. This humble subordinate is truly indebted to both of your excellencies for your willingness to come. I can die 100 deaths without regrets now." With that, he gave Shuezius a long bow. "Your excellency saved me from calamity today. This humble subordinate shall never forget this kindness for as long as I live." Shuezius wiped his hands with the hot handkerchief in the room and took a seat at the side. He merely said, "It's a matter of urgency. You should discuss it in detail with both excellencies first." "What is it?" Kong Qiu sized up Liang Qiushan. "Going by the dates, you should have arrived in Chu capital only the day after tomorrow. The superiors are rushing me, so this humble subordinate dare not delay on the road. To tell your excellency the truth, it is also to pull the wool over the eyes of others that I dressed up like this." As Liang Qiushan spoke, he fished out an account book from under the clothes on his bosom and set it down lightly by Sen Yu's hand. "Your excellency supervises the Ministry of Revenue's audits of accounts all year round, and you would have seen this kind of account book before. Please take a look." Sen Yu flipped the account book open and looked through it for a long time before hesitatingly asking, "Isn't this the account book of the Chuan city submitted to the Ministry of Revenue at the beginning of the year?" "That's right. It's the account book of the Marquis of Helion from the Chuan city. Along with the accounts from the rest of the 7 cities, it was handed over to the Ministry of Revenue at the beginning of spring to be reviewed. The aim was to straighten out the details of their taxes and expenditures with the assistance of the Chief Surveillance Bureau. There was no issue with it at that time." Liang Qiushan fished out another account book from his bosom. "This account book, on the other hand, has been tidied up by this humble subordinate for the past few days." Sen Yu's countenance changed the instant he read the beginning of the book. "How did you sort out this account?" he asked Liang Qiushan. With a solemn expression, Liang Qiushan organized his thoughts and said, "Her Majesty drew up an imperial edict last month, and Vice Minister Pan wanted this humble subordinate to assist the Court of Judicial Review in investigating the Dan city's accounts. But this humble subordinate was in Yang City in Juexi at that time reviewing the 13 cities' sales taxes with His Excellency Zhang. Within a few days, Liang Qiushan received a visitation card from the tax circuit intendant of Juexi at the relay station. Liang Qiushan never received visitors when he was attending to official duties, but this tax circuit intendant took the opportunity to leave Liang Qiushan a small gift. Liang Qiushan opened it to find gold inside. Juexi is connected to this city and the prefecture of He province through the waterways, and the tax circuit intendant is in charge of the administration of all affairs relating to grains and the transportation of grain by water in between. It's a lucrative job, but this humble subordinate was based in the Provincial Administration Commission of Juexi, which has the Provincial Administration Commissioner, Zhang Qingshan, overseeing matters, so I dare not act rashly and inadvertently alert the perpetrator. The position of tax circuit intendant shared some similarities with Liang Qiushan's position, except that it did not hold as much authority of office as Liang Qiushan had from concurrently holding the position in two places. Even so, the tax circuit intendant wielded considerable influence when it came to a place like Juexi. Liang Qiushan did not dare to act without due consideration and end up tipping the perpetrator off, as he suspected at that time that this person had come to offer bribes at Zhang Qingshan's behest. Liang Qiushan was a very cautious man. It had not been easy for him to finally see better days after all the hard times he had to go through, so he was extremely careful when navigating the official circles. He wanted to be a capable minister, but at the same time, he also wanted to keep himself alive. Juexi was Zhang Qingshan's territory. If he had immediately submitted a memorial to impeach this tax circuit intendant, then his memorial might not even have made it out of Juexi before being detained. In addition, Zhang Qingshan's opening up of the granaries to distribute relief grains in the fourth year of the Xian era and his taking full responsibility for the matter had sent shockwaves through the imperial court and the common people. He was well loved and held in high esteem in all 13 cities of Juexi. Liang Qiushan had no chance of winning against him just based on this point alone. Furthermore, anyone with a discerning eye knew that Zhang Qingshan was Xue Ziaozuo's weapon. This humble subordinate spent sleepless nights in the relay station. Naturally, the gold cannot be accepted, but there was also the concern of sowing the seed of disaster if it was hastily returned. At this point, Liang Qiushan cast a glance at Xue Ziaozuo. Moreover, His Excellency Zhang has an unimpeachable reputation out there, and this humble subordinate, having worked with him for quite some time, more or less has some understanding of his character. For that reason, this humble subordinate went ahead and summoned that tax circuit intendant over. This was a dangerous and risky move. Liang Qiushan, who did not dare to make a rash move, had to find other traces from this breakthrough point. At the very least, he had to figure out if Zhang Qingshan was the mastermind behind the tax circuit intendant. The tax circuit intendant handles the matters pertaining to taxation of the transportation of grains via the waterway of the 13 cities. Getting money is not a difficult matter for him. Kong Qiu said. But the censor-in-chiefs under the Chief Surveillance Bureau also have their eyes on the accounts, and the origins of those ships are all clear. How could he have been able to get away with the deception? This is where this humble subordinate has doubts, Liang Qiushan said. This humble subordinate pretended not to dare accept it and asked the tax circuit intendant to take the gold back. He then told me that those golds were clean and were not items on record in the Juexi's accounts. He is in charge of the transportation of grains by water. Since it's not an entry in the Juexi's accounts, Sen Yu closed the account book, then it must be from this city or the prefecture of He province. Yan Hiru of He province is a thieving and unscrupulous merchant. He attempted to bribe me when I went to check on the transportation of grains by water in He province last year. But this man is immensely wealthy and there is no need for him to take the risk and embezzle money from the imperial court's internal account books. Liang Qiushan was even more careful when he came to the part about the Dis city. The prefectural prefect of Dis city is the son of a concubine from the Fei clan who married into the Hua clan. He is very much in the Empress Dowager's good graces, and his track record of political achievements in the yearly appraisal these past few years have been outstanding, too. This humble subject dare not incriminate him without any evidence and could only contend with that tax circuit intendant in the hope of obtaining more details. A bribery meant that there was something to be done in exchange, especially for someone in Liang Qiushan's position. He initially thought that the tax circuit intendant was Zhang Qingshan's man, and that he had come to offer a bribe because of the Juexi salt tax that they were auditing at that time, but very quickly, he discovered this to be not the case. Since these golds were not on record in the Juexi's accounts, then it meant that there was someone else behind the tax circuit intendant, and this person could only be a high-ranking official of a noble clan close to this city. Liang Qiushan would never bring up the Hua clan of this city because this was the Empress Dowager's clan and natal home. When Hua Saiqian fell from power, the only property that the imperial court confiscated from the Hua clan was Hua Saiqian's manor. In less than a year, the Empress Dowager have staged a comeback and was presently in charge of the administration of government affairs. Even if Liang Qiushan was every inch a dauntless and gutsy one, he would not dare to incriminate the Empress Dowager. But Liang Qiushan only had to think of this matter from Chu capital's perspective, and he could understand what these golds were supposed to buy. Who would be the most flustered during the time when the Empress Dowager drafted up an edict to have Liang Qiushan check the fields in Dan City with the Court of Judicial Review? The Pan clan of Dan City. At this point, Sen Yu had already figured it out. After going around in one big circle, it turned out to be the Marquis of Helian who bribed Liang Qiushan through the tax circuit intendant in order to preserve the Pan clan. The Marquis of Helian's daughter, the commandery Princess Zayu, had married a lad from the Pan clan, and his illegitimate son born of a concubine was betrothed to a maiden from the Hua clan. He was the only one who matched the profile, except that this move of his was truly unwise. Liang Qiushan owed Pan Lin a debt of gratitude for the kindness the latter had shown him by promoting him. Pan Lin had initially granted that favor at Xiao Qiye's behest, but Liang Qiushan later went on prove himself to be capable, and that was why Pan Lin was willing to let him step into the forefront. As long as Liang Qiushan had a smidgen of selfish interest, he would, for the sake of this kindness, think twice before acting when it came to the matter of Dan City. This was something he could not refuse. But things are complicated now. The Marquis of Helian sent someone to bribe him. Liang Qiushan only had to skip reporting this to the top, and he could be considered to have repaid Pan Lin's kindness to him. Subsequently, he would no longer be encumbered when checking Dan City's accounts in the future. And that was not all. Liang Qiushan even secretly re-examined the 8 cities' accounts following along the trail of this bribe and repeatedly reviewed the accounts of the Marquis of Helian's Fei clan of Chuan City. The so-called money that could not be found in the account books actually came from the invisible checkpoints the noble clans set up within their own cities when ships or caravans of traveling merchants passed through the checkpoints. In order to transit through, the merchants could only pay private taxes to the noble clans at double the price. Later on, men like Yan He rejoined the fray. He wanted to get back all the money he had forked out, so he took the Shi clan's place and started to resell the copper, iron, and salt within the territories on behalf of the noble clans and the local officials of various ranks, thereby bypassing the tariffs. The small trade market of Dun province was thus established. Sen Yu reopened the account book Liang Qiushan had put into order and looked at the sum of silver for a dizzying moment. They had been caught in a tussle with the noble clans all these years in Chu capital, and a number of capable officials had all successively met their ends in their quest to get to the bottom of these accounts. The 2 account books of Hua Saiqian and Pan Rugui that Hai Lianji recovered during the reign of Xian had been merely the tip of the iceberg. Even though the resurgence in the reign of Yanji had been short-lived, the taxation system it had left behind in the various regions made up for the largest share of the state treasury's annual revenue. Great Zhou's rapid decline in just over a decade was inextricably linked to bad debts. It had been internally dug clean, with this lot of money flowing into the pockets of the noble clans. Sen Yu could barely remain steady in his seat. Even his hands that were holding onto the account book were trembling. Other than the tax money, there were also the crop fields. Sen Yu did not even have to do the math, and he could already imagine just how colossal the outflow of money was. When Libai resorted to arms during the reign of Xiand, it did not receive any military salaries and provisions. Xiao Jiming could only rely on whatever bits of grain farmed by the Libai military garrison, who also did farming duties to head down south and fight the Bianchi cavalry back. Sen Yu's breathing quickened as his trembling hand flipped the pages. Qidong did not receive any military salaries and provisions then either. Lu Guangbai supplemented reinforcements up north using Qi Ziyuan's dowry, and for the past few years, Qi Xiu has spent all the money from his estate on the garrison troops. Then, there was also the time during the first year of the reign of Tian Chen, when the Qingsha tribe fought their way to the entrance of the Bianjun commandery. Lu Guangbai's army was so starved they had to eat sand. Every time. Every single time. The reason the commanding generals of the north and south entered the capital was to ask for money. Qi Ziyuan was even forced into fraternizing with the ruffians and loan sharks in Chu capital. Meanwhile, Lu Guangbai did not even manage to get a single audience with the emperor during the reign of Xiand. How many people died when Juexi was suffering from drought? Zhang Qingshan gritted his teeth and opened up the granaries to distribute relief grains to the people, and his mother, who was already in her 80s, even had to weave fabric to pay off the debt. The 6 prefectures of Zongbo were helpless in the face of the empty coffers, forcing Zhougui, Luomu, Huoqing, and the rest of them to submit to and grovel before the bandits. This was the cause of lack of money that the Ministry of Revenue bemoaned. Clenching his teeth in hatred, Sen Yu flung the account book onto the table. The private crop fields appropriated by the 8 cities haven't even been included. This is all blood money. At this point, he started to get choked up. The Secretariat elder pursued the matter to such an extent. The country was already heading for ruin in the reign of Xiand. Is it still salvageable? No, it isn't. The room fell silent. Liang Qiushan hung his head in silence. He was a drifting duckweed without roots and connections. If he wanted to continue delving deeper into this matter, he needed a powerful backer. He first communicated with Zhang Qingshan, through which he was granted a meeting with Xue Zaiozhuo. It was only then did he finally manage to see Kong Qiu and Sen Yu. He did not accept the gold from the Marquis of Helion, but it was useless to merely keep it sealed on hand. Someone had to vouch for him. Otherwise, he would have to die as long as he did not forge the accounts as the Marquis of Helion wished once he arrived in Dan City. Not even Pan Lin would be able to protect him. The handkerchief Xue Zaiozhuo had set at the side had gone cold. I should avoid doing anything that might cast suspicions on me when it comes to this, but this concerns Kongshan's safety, and it also involves the investigations of the fields in Dan City, so I can only discuss it here with both gentlemen. As he spoke, he poured tea for Sen Yu and Kong Qiu. I heard news today of Qidong's use of military forces, and I presume that the Ministry of Revenue is going to shirk responsibility again. With all the bad debts from the various areas thrown together into one big mess, I fear that the spring plowing and Qidong's military provisions will be delayed. Kong Qiu had misgivings about Xue Zaiozhuo. Xue Zaiozhuo's move with the heir apparent had been too daring and dangerous. What's more, he used the storm that the Imperial College stirred up to suppress and edge out the officials of humble origins, which left a bad taste in Kong Qiu's mouth now that the proactive faction was in full swing. His intuition from all his years of service in the Ministry of Justice told him in no uncertain terms that Xue Zaiozhuo would never ever be at his wits' end, so he said, "Surely you did not call us here just to look at the account books." A matter discussed, a matter concluded. Xue Zaiozhuo changed his form of address for Kong Qiu. The senior Grand Secretary did not question Commander-in-Chief Qi's use of military forces on the Qingsha tribe during the discussion in Mingli Hall. I presume you approve of it, but the Ministry of Revenue is indeed hard-pressed to bear the expense for military salaries and provisions due to the depleted state treasury. That was why you did not discuss it in detail with Her Majesty. That's right. Kong Qiu was even more composed now compared to the time when Hai Lianji was still around. Commander-in-Chief Qi's use of military force on the Qingsha tribe at this time may seem to be removing foreign aggression for Libai, but in fact, it is to sweep Great Zhou clean of invaders. Amuir has wild ambitions. No egg stays unbroken when the nest is overturned. Likewise, no one can escape unscathed if Great Zhou is invaded. Helping Libai now is helping Great Zhou. Xue Xiaozuo retrieved a booklet from his sleeve and pushed it beside Kong Qiu's hand. This is a rough estimate of Qidong's expenses for military salaries and provisions. Deploying troops long distance is not as cheap as stationing garrison troops in the Bianjun Commandery in the past. Just the consumption of grain wagons is enough to eat up the tax silver of the entire Bama province territory last year. Kong Qiu looked at that booklet and said, a portion of the silvers was used up last year to provide relief in the disaster-stricken areas. Furthermore, it's nearing the beginning of spring now. Whether the spring plowing in the 8 cities can be carried out without a hitch is a major issue we have to consider too. If the noble clans aren't willing to return the commoners' fields and make up for the arrears in land taxes, the Grand Secretariat has no way of giving Commander-in-Chief Qi an official written reply with regard to her request to deploy troops. No matter how clear your estimates are, it's pointless. I do have an idea. Xue Xiaozuo looked at Kong Qiu. The Xue clan can bear Qidong's expense this time. Not only were Kong Qiu and Sen Yu stunned when the words left his mouth, but even Liang Qiuishan was, too. It was common knowledge that the Xue clan of Quan City were already showing signs of decline since the last generation. The legitimate son of the principal wife, Xue Xiaoyi, was a hypocrite who pretended to be virtuous and lofty. He kept getting duped by a group of charlatans from the martial fraternity into chalking up debts everywhere. To date, their household only had one Xue Xiaozuo who was capable enough to stand on the imperial court. So where on earth would the Xue clan have money? It suddenly dawned on Liang Qiuishan, and he remembered Shenzhequan before Shi Hongxian came to his mind. Kong Qiu gazed at Xue Xiaozuo in astonishment and uncertainty. It's such a large sum. We might not be able to repay it even if I issue a memorandum of debt to you in my capacity as the senior Grand Secretary of the Grand Secretariat. There is no need for the senior Grand Secretary to issue me a memorandum of debt. Xue Xiaozuo poured a cup of tea for Kong Qiu and said with a severe countenance, all I ask is for the senior Grand Secretary to join forces with me to audit the 8 cities' field taxes. ******. The lanterns outside the relay station started swaying as the wind swept away the tattered notices on the road. The indistinct reed pipes music from the Donglong street of Chu capital wafted through the long road of the relay station until it was obstructed by the palace walls, where it then disappeared among the double-eave roofs. Li Jianting, who was within those palace walls, sat by the edge of the couch and recalled her past under the tinkling of the metal wind chimes. Feng Quan was putting down the drapes for Li Jianting when he suddenly heard the heir apparent ask, "Do you wear earrings?" With her black hair cascading over her shoulders, Li Jianting gazed at the deep and quiet bedchamber and continued as if answering for both Feng Quan and herself. "I abhor earrings." Her eyes that so resembled Emperor Guangcheng turned towards Feng Quan, gradually curving into a smile under the darkness. "Wearing it makes one look like livestock, the kind that lies at the mercy of others." End chapter.